So Mark mentioned 12 drivers of execution. I spend 1 minute on this, and then we're going to break it down with a particular focus on those two elements that we believe typically are missing in leadership execution, and that's the engage and excite piece and the sustain momentum piece. So in short, 4 elements: set direction, engage, excite, enable and execute, and sustain momentum. You'll notice that 2 of those are reasonably rational things, very cognitive things, very brain-based things. And 2 of those are heart-based, more about how people feel, whether they're motivated, excited, whether they're committed or not. So set direction, very rational; enable and execute, very rational; but that engage and excite, very emotional; sustain momentum, all very emotional things. The 12 buckets. Wouldn't it be good if we had a very clear vision that was compelling and inspiring? Wouldn't it be good if we had absolute clarity over what we should stop doing and what we should start doing, where we should spend our money and where we should spend our time and where we should spend our headcount and resources? Well, that's the strategy. Wouldn't it be good if we had assessed that strategy amongst our stakeholder groups, clients, shareholders, employees, suppliers, providers of services? Wouldn't it be good if we pressure tested our vision and strategy with that audience, because that would give us confidence that the marketplace wanted it? Organizations tend to be pretty good at that. What we're not so good at is driving the believability in that strategy for our employees. So to what extent do our employees believe it's a good strategy? To what extent do they believe the leadership and the organization can deliver the strategy? And finally, to what extent do the individuals believe that they can contribute, that they're ready for it? And then secondly, to what extent do they want it? And wanting it is a lot harder than you think. So somebody mentioned in the chat function, to what extent have we answered the question, what's in it for me? So if we haven't answered the what's in it for me, then how do we know that they really, really want it compared to the status quo? Because there's definitely some value in the status quo. It's easy, it's comfortable, it's predictable, it's routine. So the status quo is quite desirable. So how have we made sure that going through that pain of change is more desirable than the status quo? So belief and desire, we're going to talk about those in a moment. I think we're good at enable and execute. So we put in a Gantt chart or a critical path, and we create this action roadmap with milestones and stages in the project plan. We're not bad at either recruiting capability to deliver or indeed developing capability. I agree, sometimes that's missing. And we're not so bad at making sure people have got the right tools to execute. All those 3 things could definitely be improved. Again, where we tend to fall down on is how do we make sure that we are visible as leaders? How do we make progress of the strategy visible to everybody else, so everybody feels like they're making progress? And how do we make sure everybody's rewarded and recognized and energized to carry on executing the strategy? And the last couple of items around sustain momentum is, and people mentioned it again on the chat function, is how do we make sure everybody's absolutely clear of what is expected of them in terms of execution? So everybody's clear on who's accountable, who's responsible, what those metrics are of accountability and responsibility, and what the expectations of the organization are with regards to whatever behavior change that Steve has to do that's different from what Steve did last year, right? And the final thing is all about making sure that it's embedded in the institution and that any lessons learned on the journey of execution are implemented across the organization. So making sure that leaders embody, if you like, and promote a continuous improvement culture or environment where people are learning, experimenting, and applying new lessons to the execution of the program. So 12 leadership drivers. We think that most leaders are pretty good at maybe 4 or 5 or 6 of them. So we're going to spend the rest of this session looking at the engage and excite and the sustain momentum piece. And with that, I shall hand over back to Mark, who can talk a little bit more about that first piece, which is about driving belief in your strategy and in your team. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, believability, I guess, you know, from a change perspective, for us to be engaged and excited about the change, we have to believe that there's going to be some material good coming from the change. It's going to improve the way we work. It's going to be better, at least, than the status quo. And I guess, you know, when we talked last time about the change curve in the previous sessions, and you saw that drop off after denial down to that kind of anger and blame state at the bottom, that would be the opposite to engaged and excited, right? Why? Because we believe at the bottom of that curve, where there's a choice to make, either we exit or we persevere, that it's not going to happen, right? You know, I believe this change won't work. I believe I'm not good enough to steer this team through as a leader. I believe that we've got a terrible track record of implementing new technology. Whatever the belief, there is associated behavior that goes with that. And you know, I'm not going to bore you with the analogy with the iceberg. Everybody's seen this before, but essentially what this is saying is that you know, if you believe you can or you can't, you're probably right, as the quote goes. And essentially what that means is we've got a set of empowering, or we've got a set of limiting beliefs, either about ourselves, about the organization, our team's readiness for change, whatever it might be. So empowering beliefs take us towards our goal, limiting beliefs turn us around the other way. Or even worse, they create inertia within a team. And inertia is, as everybody knows who's gone through large-scale change, is one of the hardest things to get going again, because you really got to get some energy behind it. And so let's take the, Steve, you can go back a slide for me, 1 second. In terms of this, you know, let's just, for example, say we have a limiting belief that this won't work, this change project will not work. So that's the belief at the bottom of the iceberg, and that's where the pack ice, it's, you know, it's deep, it's dark, it's been there for a long time. And those beliefs then drive the way that we feel. So that's a state, and you can see that sort of scale of 1 to 10. 1 feeling terrible, 10 feeling good. 10, I think this is going to be successful. 1, I think it's not. And that's very much pans out from a feeling perspective. So I feel motivated and upbeat. I feel anxious and tired and scared. That then goes, now we're going above the line, and we can start to see this in people's physiology. We start to hear it in their dialogue, which is behavior, i.e. say and do. All right, and it doesn't take a genius to uncover what the behavior is of somebody that has a strong belief this is not going to work. And then that typically pans out in their result. All right, the change is largely unsuccessful if the team is not behind it. Now, the interesting thing there, and why this is a self-fulfilling prophecy, is that negative result comes round and then reinforces that belief as a reference from a psychology perspective. A series of reference points makes that belief extremely strong. And anybody who's ever tried with people to try and change a negative belief into a positive belief will probably agree with me, it's not an easy thing to do. One of the ways that we go about this, and we've seen things work, is you really need to start to destabilize. We need to start to, don't attack the belief, we attack the table leg, if you like, that's holding the belief up. If we can start to destabilize those, the belief caves in and gives away. At least neutralizes the negative one. Then your job as a leader is to then build the person up, build that belief system up so that they can start to take action again. But that's kind of an example of a self-fulfilling prophecy. We have a belief, our brain then scans the world for evidence to back up that we are correct, all right, and the process starts again. All right, so that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So believability is absolutely key in this whole process around engage and excite. Incredibly emotional. Steve, next slide.